Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with Mystic Gen Mara, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho, and tonight is our Myth and Tarot series, and we're going to look at one of ancient Greece's more interesting human-animal hybrids, which is the centaur. Originally thought to reside in the mountains of Thessaly, which is known as a very lawless land, and Arcadia, which is an interesting locations for both of them. This particular series, jumped in before we finished introductions, is where we look at a mythological creature from history, and then we do a tarot reading at the end, just kind of see if they're still around, if they still exist, what would their tarot messages be for this particular moment in time. So it's kind of a fun way just to, go through some of the lessons or interests of the tarot, and learn something about some history that may not be mainstream. So, and the creature we are speaking of today is, find the right picture, this guy, right, oops, here. And in most traditions, the centaur, move him, were offsprings of Ixion, the king of, oh good grief, Lapiths, which is a weird spelling for a country. And what's interesting is it's not just his offspring, and of course we're talking about Greece, so Zeus had to be involved at some point. Zeus made a cloud nymph to appear as his wife, Hera. Why did he do this? Well, because Ixion had a huge crush on Hera. From the depictions I've seen, I'm not sure why he was chasing her when there was many others and better ones out there, but whatever. And it could have been a power thing. She was, married to the top dog, so whatever the reason was, Ixion fell to his lusts, and bing bang boom, centaurs. The horse-like appearance that comes from the mother is because the cloud nymph was named Nephele and was a Magnesian, that's a weird word, Magnesian mare. So she was a cloud nymph, but she took on the appearance of a horse more frequently than not. Apparently they were driven from the land shortly thereafter, being born into the land of Lapith, because the centaurs, and this is where it's a little bit weird, is you start off with Ixion and Nephele having this centaur baby, but within one generation, literally, there's so many of them that there's like an army, and they tried to carry off the wife of the crown prince, so can't have that happening. So they were driven out of the area, which started a huge war. That was one of the bigger myths about them, is this war against Lapiths because of being chased out, because they were trying to steal the king's basically daughter-in-law. There's a lot of myths around these guys, so we're going to try to stick to the more common themes. They're literally, when I got down to the bottom of some of these, they're like, this is the main one, but then here are some side ones. I've tossed a couple of them in as we go, but trying to form a thread through histories like this is interesting, because you got your primary, especially in the Greeks tradition, you have your primary Olympian-based myths, but then you have outliers because they incorporated from other cultures, and so you've got these weird amalgamations. So I tried to stick to just the primary stories about them. So there's also a story that later, after they were kicked out of Lapiths, that they were shown in some of the art being pulling the chariots of Dionysus, or being ridden by the god of love himself, Eros, which is interesting, because this led to the belief that centaurs are bawdy, drunken, amorous creatures with no control of their animalistic lusts. Kind of sounds like the way Hollywood portrays pirates today, doesn't it? Anyway, I do find it interesting that centaurs, when they were sober, were actually well liked, and even people wanted to have them around. It was drinking that made people hate them because they were very powerful beings. Most of the imagery from that time, they were almost like draft horse crossbreeds. So we're not talking about, a pony, we're talking about something like a Clydesdale. And the man on top, the half man part on top, was powerful like that. So not something you want to have drunk tearing up your town. Like, just I understand completely where they're coming from. So I showed one picture already about what the creatures look like. Most legends do have them shown with a human from the waist up, a horse from the waist down. The attachment point is where they would be on around the neck area, or there's kind of like right here. And so you have, from the waist up, it's human. From the waist down, attached at the neck part of the horse, is the horse part. And you'll notice from this picture in particular, because I purposely picked this one, the hair is very shaggy and very unkempt hair. Their beards, when they would have them, were very shaggy and unkempt. And it was kind of this concept of they were wild and untamed, therefore this is how they looked. Some of the legends also showed them as being fully human with the added aspect of a horse rear end, which is like this guy here. And this is Chiron, which I'll talk a little bit about him later, but he comes from a different line of centaurs. From what I found, there were at least 2, if not 3 clans of centaur. The first one being this clan, which was horse from the waist down. The other clan was these guys, which were more a human through the whole front end and just had the addition of the horse on the back. Again, these were taller than normal because they were, half horse, so we're talking 7 or 8 foot tall humans. So, take that one down. The other one is there are some depictions where the humans had ram-like horns, like goat horns or like mountain sheep horns growing out of their heads, and sometimes they had donkey ears as well. This is the closest thing I could find with horns on it. That was, open source anyway. There were other images. If you Google centaurs with horns, you'll find a lot. There's some which I don't agree with. They have them like the deer antler types. That's not historically accurate in any way, shape, or form. That's a modern interpretation, but there are some really cool ones out there where they have like full coil horns, or they'll have like these coiling back, almost like an ibex, but much larger. Again, I couldn't find too much that was open source, so we're going with those as much as possible. So yeah, they have these interesting views about them because they're interesting creatures, really. Most legends only show male centaurs because of the personality in a lot of ways. But the myths do explain that there were female versions called centaurides. Some say they were added around the 5th century BC. The writer Ovid even talks about female centaurs in some of his works. I've linked the primary source of Ovid's work in the description box, as well as some other interesting little tidbits and fun things where you can find other parts of centaurs in more pop culture aspects. Where was I? There. Centaurs would be viewed as the antithesis of culture and civilization in a lot of Greek communities, because all humans hold both intellect and aggression. That's been known from humans' memory. The centaurs, though, because they were half animal as well, their aggression passion tended to dominate their existence, and it would get really bad at certain times. There was a belief in Greece that the centaurs were evil because they did not conform to the culture of civilization that the Greeks were exceptionally proud of. They had good reason. Greeks for their time were the pinnacle of civilization. Even the Romans copied a lot of the Greek cultures and expanded upon it massively, but the Greeks were kind of the first to really, in the more modern era, civilize themselves. If you go back to the Sumerians, different story, but in their time, the Greeks were kind of the pinnacle, and we still use an unbelievable amount of what they developed today. So there were others, like I said, with the that liked the Centaurs a lot, as long as the drink of Dionysus was not involved. That always was the issue with those guys, because what does alcohol do? It lowers your inhibitions. Well, if your inhibitions take you from cool, calm, collected, and intellectual to 100% animalistic everything, not a good call. So they, no booze for the Centaurs. And those aggressions and passions were not limited to war and brawls, which was a more common theme. There was also the other side of passion and aggression, and it was said that they would kidnap and, we'll say this politically correct because of the channels that I'm running on, they would do dirty things without consent to women. There were allusions that they would do it with men as well. I mean, they were drinking heavily, and the Greeks were not opposed to same-gender copulations. So they were not great when they were drunk. If they were sober, they were awesome. If they were drunk, not so much. Details were very mixed from what I could find on the lifespan of centaurs. Some legends state they are 100% immortal. Others stated that they could be killed or die, but there was not a lifespan referenced in any of the places that I looked, and I literally dug and Googled things like, how long is the lifespan of a centaur? It was mixed. Some people would say 200 years, some people would say 50. Your guess is as good as mine, because I haven't actually got to meet one and talk to one yet. So, a little side note, I mentioned him earlier, I'm going to mention him briefly here, and that is one of the most positive centaurs in Greek history and history to this day was Chiron. He was a renowned healer. His knowledge was second to no one according to legends. He was trained by the gods themselves in the healing arts. He instructed many of ancient Greece's heroes, including Hercules, Achilles, and a few others, and actually taught I always screw this guy's name up, Asclepius, the healing arts. The interesting thing that I found about Chiron, and I did not know this before I started researching this, he was Achilles' great-grandfather. So he was still alive and taught Achilles, and that would have made him at least 200 years old, so they have exceptionally long lifespans. And Chiron was one of the ones, like, this guy. He had the human front end with a horse back end. And Chiron, though, according to legend, did die of... There was a war. He happened to be out on the field helping people heal. Hercules shot an enemy. The arrow, poison-tipped arrow, went through the enemy and punctured Chiron's arm. Well, his bicep is what it was said. And when they removed it, the poison had gotten into his system, and so he was just screaming for death because he was immortal, and he wouldn't die. The gods actually were gracious. Not very often does this happen with the Olympic gods, and they granted him death, but he had done so much good work that they placed him amongst the stars as the constellation of Centaurus, which was the legend. But today we also know him as in astrological charts as the injured healing comet named Chiron. And it's interesting where he shows up, because he's actually in my charts, which I didn't even hear about, never even knew about him until I had my charts read. So check your birth charts if you've had them done and see if Chiron shows up, because the wounded healer has a very interesting message if you do have him in your charts. Look at the houses and do some comparison, because that is very important. Out of the chart itself, Chiron showing up is makes for a unique combination of things. And I would I will probably go over Chiron specifically by himself at a later date. He has an exceptionally vast story all to himself. Whether I do that on a Monday night like this, or if I do it on a Tuesday or bonus video or something. But he's definitely one I want to go over more later, so if you have any suggestions or ideas, comment and let me know. So today, people try to explain away centaurs as forest-dwelling people that gave up parts of their humanity and take on animalistic qualities or personalities. Cool. They claim that the images are to represent the animal and human parts of these wildwood people, because God forbid we believe in something that might be different than what we think. Or they think that they could be the wild men of Thessaly who were known to be good on horseback to the point where they were thought of as one being, but it still had a horse head. Centaurs don't. It's fascinating to me to see how people try to explain away the paranormal, the supernatural, the preternatural. The Catholic Church years ago went through a whole philosophy, thanks to Freud, that there were not anything demonic, they were just negative personality traits. No, that's not how this works. They still are trying to figure out what Sasquatch is, although there's a lot more truth to those legends now than there ever has been. And then even the federal government of the United States finally came out and said, yeah, we know there's aliens, and everyone else is like, no kidding. That's not news to any of us. But it's one of those things where we as cultures have blinded ourselves to what could be out there. And I'm not saying that these guys exist or not, but the insistence on trying to comprehend why they would put these on jars, because they saw them. Everything, and I'm sorry I feel this way about it, if they were putting paintings of it, or they were putting it on jars, or they're putting on cave walls, it's not something that they made up. They were seeing these things. I think Greece is one of the first ones outside of maybe Samaria where you start seeing a fictionalized storyline. Everything else is probably because they were seeing something that they couldn't explain, and so they were putting it down, but it was actually happening. So, again, whether they exist or not, who knows. Are the Greeks the only place that centaurs exist? In reality, and I didn't realize this either until I started studying this more, it's not. They're seen elsewhere. In India, there are legends of cursed creatures that have the body of a horse and the waist up of a man. They were cursed because they couldn't control their animal instincts, and so one of the high priests of Brahma, I believe, cursed him. If you're not going to live like a man, you can live like an animal. And then that's how they started developing centaurs. There's a reference in an Indus Valley cylinder seal about a race of warriors with horse bodies as well. Some claim that this reference is about a half tiger, half man creature. I'm not sure if that makes it any better, but so who knows what's really true there. There's also a creature called a Canaris, which has a striking resemblance to the centaurs of Greece. So you've got these two different clan-ish type creatures that show up in India as well. Oddly enough, Russia, which there's a lot of Russia we don't know, so who knows what's really out there, has a mention of a centaur-like creature called a pulkin. And I had to look that word up because I wasn't trying to say it, because Russian has some interesting linguistics. But the other lands that have been referenced where the centaurs could have been very well could be talking about the exact same Greek centaurs, because the myths of the Olympian gods and the Greek warriors driving the centaurs out say they drove them north, to the west, and to the east. Well, that would put them in Russia and India. Not so much the western direction, but the other two send them directly into where they would have been. Depending on the year, is depending on the size of Greece. So to the west, it could have ended up putting them in the ocean. So who knows exactly what direction they went on that way. But north and east would have put them straight into Russia and India. So, again, the myths tend to spread in interesting patterns, is all I have to say there. So, are centaurs still running around somewhere today? Possibly. There's no reason they couldn't be. There's a whole pile of land. We don't know what's on it. Most of it's in Russia and China, but the thing with the centaurs, though, even though their myths go back to Greece, 500 BC or before, they never left our collective consciousness, so to speak, because they're very famous today in pop culture. Harry Potter has them in the Forbidden Forest. They make an appearance in Percy Jackson and the Olympians books and movies. They're very helpful, interestingly enough, in the Chronicles of Narnia. Of course, they were probably sober, so that helps. And in the old TV show, and this will date me, the Xena Warrior Princess, which I absolutely adored, the centaurs were her allies. So they never really left our consciousness. In manga and anime, so even China and Japan and South Korea have them pop up with centaurs. There's books and movies such as Bleach, the TV series and card game Yu-Gi-Oh! Has them in it. Also, in addition to the books and the movies I already spoke of, they show up in the land of Fillory, which this might be new to you, and if you're interested in it, definitely check it out. This is not a series for children, by the way. It's a book and TV series called The Magicians. The book it's a set of 3 books, but they made it into 4 seasons. It is very well done. It's cheesy, but it's not. It's kind of like Charmed plus I just lost it. It's kind of like Charmed meets Harry Potter, but for adults. So it's definitely not for kids. The situations are a little bit racy at times, but it's really interesting. And when you go to Fillory and you see the centaurs there, they're all healers. So it's definitely something to check out. If you haven't yet, it's a lot of fun. They also make appearances in a lot of different games as well, board games, video games. Dungeons and Dragons has them heavily. World of Warcraft, Heroes of Might and Magic, which is an old school video game, but they did make appearances in there. They even make an appearance in Mortal Kombat, well, one does, as a creature called Motaro. It was in the old school PS1, 2, and some of the arcade ones. I don't know if it's in the PS4 or any of the ones after. But there's that. He also shows up, and this is really going to date me, in the old school Mega Man 6 video game, which is fun. Centaur Man is one of the bad guys. And I would be exceptionally remiss, because I have friends that are kind of into video games, if I did not mention the fact that they are also in Legends of Zelda with the appearance of Linnell. So, even though these creatures started their existences approximately 2,500 years ago, if not 3,000 years ago in Greece, you see how much is right there, and this isn't even everything. When I looked up centaurs in pop culture, I had pages and pages and pages, lists, 12-point font, like full page of the computer screen of references. They're in books all over the place. They're in movies going back years. I mean, these creatures are, something about them catches our attention and doesn't let it leave. So whether or not they're really out there or, not is up for debate, obviously. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest there might have been something at some time that appeared as that creature. So, it's up to you to decide whether or not they were real. And, oops, wrong button. Oh, good grief. As we do on this particular series, it is now time for the tarot. And I use for this particular reading the basic Celtic cross. There it is. my computer updated and messed everything up, so give me 1 second. It's driving me bonkers. I tried to get everything ready beforehand, and it still's got me annoyed right now. So, there. So I just use the tarot, and I read as if they're sitting in front of me. So let's say that there was some centaur that came in to a shop I worked at and was like, I need a reading, I don't know, fill in the blank. So what I do in these, because they're for fun, these are, the first part is the history lesson and kind of giving you an idea of where they're at, who they are, type of a thing. And then we go through and just see what the energies would be if they were here. And if you choose to have a centaur show up, or you choose to work with the centaur energy in the spiritual sense, because they do show up a little bit in the occult as well. Their energy tends towards earth, obviously, they're that type of creature, but they have a little bit of fire tied in there. But their parentage would say that they also have air. So really the only place that I can't say that they don't work well in is the water realm, but earth and air are their primaries, but they also have that fire, that intellect with passion tied in there. So they're definitely interesting creatures to watch. And if you ever have the chance to work with them in meditation, or one shows up as, let's say, animal guide, that they definitely are interesting when that comes in, because they don't respond like other ones trying to, oh, we're so happy to see you. It's more like, yo, like, think of the big jock that you knew in high school. That's kind of how they act. But if they're showing up, that means they're willing to work with you at least. So, and it's definitely an interesting set of creatures when you start looking into them deeper. And each one of them is going to respond differently. You'll have some that are the wild, rugged, sword on their back and who knows what else going on there, grunting type creatures. But then you also have some that are very polite, very refined. That's where you get that mix of the different types and different classes. My experience and my studies have shown there's 2 different primaries, which is kind of fun. But definitely do some exploring. Make sure that you're ready for the intensity, because when they talk about passion and aggression, they're very upfront when they make contact. So be aware of that. Even if it's a good, friendly one, they tend to be a little bit bombastic. So we'll start off with the significator, which is this is where they're at in this moment, and it is the sun. So things are going their way right now. Obviously, they're standing in their power. There's the feminine aspect supporting them, because there are actually feminine centaurs. But they've kind of kept, according to what I'm seeing here, they're still multiplying. They're still out there doing their things, which is pretty cool. And it's that growth and their expansion. So the sun's shining on them. They're actually being seen in very positive light. I don't know, maybe some of them joined AA, but they're being seen very positively right now, and that's where they're standing. So where they're at in this moment is really, really brilliant. They're starting to want to step out into the daylight more. So, they do exist. They may start making more appearances, and that's what's coming forward. They're being supported by the moon, so their intuition is tying into other people's. That's probably the reason they become so popular over the years, is they're trying to reach out and make connections again, which is pretty cool. The things that are crossing them, their primary challenge is the 3 of Wands. I love this deck, but I do have to edit. And that is really stating that their passions are what they're worried about. They don't want to lose control again. They don't want to be chased out again. They were driven out of society as it was, because the culture that they were in at the time didn't understand them, and their passions were so out of control they couldn't understand themselves. So their passions are what's getting in their way, but they are trying to reach out and make more of a connection in the current world, which is pretty cool. Their higher self is the Eight of Swords, but their intellect, they're not really sure. They don't want to overstep their bounds. They have this belief that they deserve to be out and about again. But with the Eight of Swords, they're kind of lost in their overthinking pattern. They keep seeing things like, well, what if? They play the what if game, and that never works out well for anybody, especially not creatures like this. They're really not sure what's going to happen next, and so they're overthinking, and their higher self is like, well, we have to make sure that we're ready for this. We have to make sure that this is where we're stepping forward with what we're doing. And it's kind of like the way the UFO community has been looking at it. They had to make sure the timing was right, although that's a different story. But that's what they're looking on, is they're trying to figure out when would be a good time, how to address it if they have more hostility like they did before. Their subconscious self is their one of chalices, so emotionally they are overflowing. They are ready to do this, and it's kind of, the energy I'm getting is it's breaking their hearts that they have to be in hiding right now. They would much rather be able to step out and be in the world again instead of hiding in the shadows. Because at one point they were out in the world, and now they've been in hiding, and it's like, do we have to keep doing this? Can't we just step out? Is it really going to be that bad? And that comes back to us as humanity. When you think about humans as a whole, having an entire new species of intelligent creatures like the Centaurs coming forward, what do you think that would do to the world if all of a sudden an entire new species popped up and they're kind of intellectually our equals? It would be a shocker, to say the least. And so that's where that emotion's coming in. Like, they know it's that they can do this, they're just not sure how we're going to respond. So their immediate past, and for immortals we'll go the last 100 years, is the Two of Swords. So they still have in their history, this is their past, that fun-loving, that we can do this, we can have a lot of laughs, their companionship, they're very social. And if you've ever watched horses when they're in herds, they are very social. They're constantly reaching out and making noises, basically talking to each other, and that's part of them, but that's also part of us as humanity. So their history is an exceptionally social history, and they really want to get back to that, and they want to do it with the sword's energy, which is air. They want to tie into the intellectual part of it as well. They don't want to just be these big, dumb, passionate animals. They want to be able to express themselves in an intellectual capacity as well. So their immediate future, the next 100 years or so, is the Four of Pentacles. They're still struggling with this concept. They're social, but they don't want to be dominated. That is something that they're seeing in their future, and this is something that's coming forward. If they come forward and come out to everyone at the wrong time, they could end up in a zoo, really. I mean, seriously. Half horse, half human things just pop up out of nowhere. There's going to be some issues, and that's something that's coming forward for their future, and that is something that they are concerned about, because they want to be able to work with us, not be examined by us like a chemistry set. And that is something that they're seeing in their future if they come out at the wrong time. So, where are we at here? So this is their hopes and fear. No, wrong one. Their attitude. I need to read my lists better. So their current attitude is the One of Swords. They're a little bit on the depressed side. You can tell that there's big energy, and this is like the little Roman Colosseum or Roman building here. There's big energy. There's a lot of things coming forward. They are really wanting to do this, but it's that fear of the unknown that is really stopping them. That fear of what if, going back to their higher self, the what if game. That's where we're coming in with these fears, and their hopes are that everything works out all right. They want to start a new beginning. It's the One of Swords, so they intellectually want to do this, but it's still that little bit of a fear of what if. What if this goes bad? What if it does turn into a unbalanced power dynamic in their future? And so they're a little concerned on that part, but let's see what their environment looks like, which is the environment of the world and kind of where they would fit into it. It's the Three of Swords. There's a lot of pairings going on in this reading. And the Three of Swords is there are other creatures in this realm that are supporting them. They're giving them encouragement. So this is your encouraging energy here, and this one over here is kind of where the centaurs are coming in. That's the images they're showing me anyway. And so you've got this encouraging, no, you guys can do this. It's not that big of a deal. Look at how broad your reach is right now. What's showing up in reality going to change, in all honesty, because they literally are in our pop culture. They're such a common thing that most people don't even realize how old that myth really is. And so that's their environment, is this environment of supporting even though they're nervous and possibly scared about it. So their hopes and fears is the Fool's card. This is Major Arcana. These are huge life lessons when you have the Major Arcana come forward. With the Fool, it's something new. They're beginning something new. As in all of the tarot decks that are based off of Rider-Waite, the Fool is starting off, but he's an idiot, doesn't know anything. Like, la-di-da, and steps on a snake and gets bit. Does that mean that he's going to stop his journey? No. So the journey that they're on doesn't mean, just because things might not work out the way they want them to in the beginning, it doesn't mean that the journey's not worth starting. And so their hopes and fears are tied to this starting. They know that it could go bad, but they also want the interaction. They want that intellectual stimulation, and they want to be able to walk amongst men again like they used to. So there's a little bit of a fear there of what if, again, that curse from their higher selves, overthinking everything. But the reward would be so much more, and that's what's coming through for that one. So the overall conclusion here is the Knight of Pentacles. So we have the Knight of Earth energy, and the Earth is hearth, home. It's a good foundation to have as a final card, because the Knights are fast moving. So whatever's coming up for them, coming back into the world of men, which would be amazing personally, is something's changing in their environment, in their world very quickly, and it looks like it's going to be something that starts setting a good foundation. They have the Fool coming in as a starting point with their hopes and fears, so you've got these new beginnings coming forward, but you also have a strong foundation as the final outcome. So it could be that with all the stuff that's popping up in pop culture, that the foundation's being laid in this moment for somehow they pop back up. I mean, there's a lot of weird things. We're always discovering something new every single day of the year. So why wouldn't it be something like this? There's entire sections of this world that we don't actually know what goes on there. So it's a possibility. But that's what the card for their foundation is, or their outcome is we have the strong foundation in the Knight of Pentacles, which is Earth, is so your foundation is strong, and that's fast moving as well. So you've got the speed of driving them towards whatever their final outcome is, which to me looks like it's making an appearance back into the world of men, which would be, like I said, flipping amazing. Anyway, with that, I thank you guys for showing up today, and thank you for the comments and chat as well. So if you're enjoying this type of content, please drop a like on the video. If you're new here, subscribe. Hit the little subscribe button, whether you're on Odyssey or YouTube. And yeah, comment if you think of anything to add to the Chiron, because I have a lot of information already, but I will add anything else that pops up. So we will talk to you guys later. Tomorrow on Tuesday the 15th, there is a mid-month check-in with tarot readings, so you can check those out popping up tomorrow. And then we'll be back here on next Monday with Occult and Crochet, where I'm working on some new projects. And we're going to do a two-parter on this next one, so it's going to be split up over 2 weeks, because the person I want to talk about next Monday is not someone I can easily condense into even an hour-long episode. It's going to be probably at least 2 hour-long episodes, if not maybe even longer than hours at a time. So with that, I will let you guys go. Thank you for showing up, and I will see you in the next video.